Well, first of all, I know that you have the pronunciation for your name, your first name.
Mm-hmm.
I say
Mm-hmm.
Tamara. Is that correct?
Yes, Tamara rhymes with camera.
Good. That's what, yeah, I see on that on your website. But I
Yeah, it
want to talk to
helps.
you yeah. Okay, what I want to talk to you about is I see that you do a billion things and we're going to discuss everything. And plus you've been online, you're one of those people that was online very early and you have not a lot of
Yeah.
knowledge and understanding, but I want to ask you how you're so productive and what motivates you and any advice that you have for people.
Oh, that's like a huge question. But yeah, a billion things, but I think I am productive because I feel an urgency to use the time I have as a writer, as a human being, to, fulfill a purpose. And I guess the big answer, if I spend a lot of time, is to just go back to like age 4 or 5 when I started writing sentences and learned that I was actually a writer at a very young age. And I mean, thinking and writing and reading in complete, complex sentences. And I learned right away that that was my purpose. And so that makes me maybe a little bit different from other people because a lot of people spend their whole lives trying to figure out who they are, what they're supposed to do with their time. But I've always had that. But trying to be the creative writer that sort of wants to change the world, that's all well and good, but you also got to pay bills. You also have to, raise children and do all these other things. And so for me, I am someone who needs lists. I'm someone who needs to always ask myself, do I really need to do this right now? And boundaries. And it's taken a lot of time to figure out what those boundaries are and where to say no and when to say yes, even to things that aren't paying or seem like obvious tasks that you want to, complete, not just for yourself but for somebody else, maybe on deadline for somebody else or because it's part of a much larger project that you're working on. So lists is a big one. I actually have ADHD, so lists also just keep me from going crazy. And I think oddly parenthood helped me. My kids are grown now. They're 26 and 28, but raising them and then trying to be, I was a publisher back then when I still had 2 children in diapers and I was a publisher. That's insane, right? I still think, how did I do that? But it was all lists and it was all just about really deciding and setting priorities and saying what needs to be done today or this hour. Even it can even be, that granular. And then being prepared to have to not do things because you have a sick kid or you've got a gymnastics meet to go to or something. And so learning to manage time because you have lots of irons in the fire is like so important to a creative person. I do a lot more than most people do. People ask me how I get it all done, and that's part of it is just like really keeping, holding fast to those lists and calendars and schedules, which is also kind of its own tyranny, and that can really break you down as a human being because you feel like I'm just a ton of what am I saying? An automaton. That's the word. Um, and just getting things done, but who am I as a human being? And then the other part of that is maybe the more spiritual part, and that's that you can't always get it all done. And I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis at age 47. That was a nice little, monkey wrench to throw into the mix. And so I had to really develop boundaries and set priorities and say no to a lot more stuff because I had all these other issues with my brain that I had to really tend to. So the hidden blessing in that is that it's really much easier to say no because okay, if I say yes to that, then I'm kind of going to be obliterated by whatever I end up doing because it's going to eat up all of my energy and my time. And I'm going to be so, disappointed in myself that I didn't say no later. So I guess that's like the overarching thing. It's just this idea that I feel like, I'm here for a reason. I'm here to write. I'm here to create. I make, short stories and I'm working on novels. I write essays. I've written columns. I'm now making these little films. I have a new book coming out. All of these things, I just feel like to get them done, you have to really want that too. I would actually point out that there are lots of people. who want to be writers, who like the idea of being a writer, a published writer, but they may not be writers. They may just like the idea. I can say I've been a writer my whole life, and so I can't not write. And so for me, trying to add some order to all this chaos is really just for me to be able to be the writer I want to be. And that means, putting things within baskets and deciding what's a priority, what's not, what can wait, what needs to be done right now. And then ultimately forgiving yourself if you can't get to all the things, because especially right now, there's so many ways to promote yourself as a writer in social media, um, or in at events or whatever. Um, and there's this pressure, I think, that we all as creatives feel that we have to do all the things, this hustle mentality. And there's also this idea of scarcity. Like, if I don't do it, someone else is going to take my place, which I think is a bunch of garbage, actually. I think there's space for everybody, um, in the creative space. If you're making something that's unique to you and original to you, it has a place in the world. There's no reason to worry about, someone else taking that space. There's no limited number of slots that need to be filled up. So there is that mindset though. Anyway, so maybe I'm rambling a little bit, but um, yeah, I think you have to really want to be a writer to get it done. And you have to just really do the work, push up your sleeves, set those boundaries, push away things that don't serve your interests. Even if you're really good at it and you kind of enjoy it, it may still be a distraction from what your bigger goal is. So I hope that answers that question.
Well, I mean, you brought up a lot of things. Well, so a lot of things
I
I want to
did.
get into, but
Yeah,
okay, so
let's do
one
it.
thing, yeah, one thing is that I think that people are competitive because they want to make money from it. So what about that
Yes.
part? Yes, we can
Okay.
produce content all day long.
I know we could. Now that puts me in a position where I have the privilege to say that I don't need to create to make money. I've worked as a writer and made money at it and made a decent amount of money at it. But I've never been in the position to be pressured to do that. I appreciate that argument that, how am I going to do this? But I am not going to be the writer that writes to a market or jumps on a trend just to sell a book or to write and create and sell a book or whatever it is that I want to make. That's just not who I am. I already have for myself a kind of vision. And I actually think it's not a bad idea for some people to maybe do something else entirely from your creative thing and make your creative thing your own baby and not put the pressure on that career path to earn you enough money to pay your bills. I think you can be a creative person and still have a job and run a family and do all these things. And I think sometimes it's even better to not have a creative job. I mean, maybe have a really boring job or maybe bartend or do whatever it is to pay your bills so that you keep that brain space open, for yourself. But I've been in a position, I have the privilege of not being forced to have to earn money as a creative writer. So, I mean, I still pursued journalism, I still pursued magazine editing, publishing in college, and that has always been what I've worked at. I didn't make a huge amount of money as a publisher, but I was able to pay my writers, and that was the most important thing. Um, so yeah, so I guess for the people that want to make a living at it, oh man, it is really hard. It is, I don't think it's really been any harder because as much as the promise of selling in Amazon or all these, self-publishing or all these other options are available and they're all good for different kinds of projects for sure. There's so many fingers in the pie still that want to take some of it away, and then you end up having to pay for services like editing and design, marketing and publicity, and at the end of the day there's not that much left, and that's not even talking about someone who's like, like not a big name writer or artist. I know big name writers and they still have day jobs because they're not making money, not making the kind of money that we would all like to be able to make being creative people. But I think that's just the nature of capitalism and the nature of the creative world in this country anyway, whereas it's really about product and production And I know there are writers who are like cranking out a new book every month, even. I don't know what that kind of writing looks like. I'm not sure how long those writers, even if they're really good at it, how long can you maintain that? I don't know. So the ultimate question of whether you can make money as a writer, to me, I've never felt like I was going to make money as a writer enough to like set myself free and be able to buy an island in the, South China Sea or whatever. I've just never had, I feel like that's kind of an illusion. We can also, I guess, if we're not really in it to be creative, but because we want to make money at it, we can talk ourselves into thinking we can do certain things to be to create, and then if we're not fully in it all the time, we're just going to burn out. So I going back, I have the privilege of being able to not have to do that. I think this is a different question, especially if we're talking gender roles, because I think a lot of men really, really want to make money as writers so that they can provide for their families. I did not have that pressure on me. And I do feel for men in particular who feel this pressure to be the breadwinner. Um, and so they have lots of strategies that I've never even really thought about using or wanted to use because I just don't feel that it's just not my pathway. So hopefully that answers.
Yeah, and it's really incredible. This is why I like talking to you. I could easily talk to you for like 5 hours in
I
this live
know.
stream because well, you bring up so many things. Like for instance, you said that you're privileged that you don't have to make money from it. A lot of people wouldn't acknowledge that, and I'm assuming you're not like really rich. I mean, I think you're, because
Pretty
some
middle
people think
class like
privilege is
everybody else.
right. Because I think like privilege, people think, oh, they're living in Beverly Hills or something. But of
No,
course, no. But
no, no.
also, but the question I have about the making the money part is, sometimes people, okay, a lot of people do put out content and then they
Hmm.
think, well, to reach an audience, I have to pay somebody or I have to pay for Facebook ads and so forth. So they do want to
Hmm.
make money from their writing because they're using money. What about that?
Well, I mean, that's a basic tenet of any kind of small business. You have to spend money to make money. And it makes sense. And I actually don't think okay, here's a great example. Even though I don't really feel like I need to make a lot of money as a writer, I am still going to be publicizing this book that's coming out. With a small press who does not have a huge budget for marketing and publicity. So that's on me. And so I will probably be very targeted in terms of publicity and spending money that way. Um, being very smart about it, as smart as I can be, and the rules always change. So you can just do the best you can, right? But I actually don't mind that people spend money. I don't mind the idea of spending money to make money. But the big challenge is knowing where and when and how much, and just acknowledge always it's kind of like going to Vegas. When you go to Vegas or go to gamble, only take what you can afford to lose and then call it good. And I know some people sink a lot of money into their books, and um, because they're self-published or because they're in a situation like I am where they really want to hit it up big and get all the praise and stuff. And that's great. I mean, we all want people to read our books and we want to publicize. We want people to find our work for sure. But it depends on where you are in the stage of your career and whether or not it's even worth it, if people are even going to see it. I'm not even sure social media ads are working so much anymore. I do feel like social media is kind of losing its grip on as a kind of outlet for creative people to promote themselves because it's not really cheap anymore and the algorithms do not favor creatives. It doesn't seem like anymore. At the end of the day, honestly, I sell more books face to face. So getting tables at county fairs and going to readings and just interacting with people face to face. I think that's still always, and word of mouth, asking your readers to please share and give reviews and that kind of thing. But yeah, you can spend money, and I mean, if you have the money to spend, why not? But with some caveats, I guess.
Well, yeah, but a lot of times, especially on publicity, because if you want, some places do really good job of publicity. Yes, we can do our own thing, but they've got certain connections. But
Yes.
sometimes when you
Yeah.
pay for that, you feel like, okay, I need to make my money back. But you're saying that even if it doesn't make its money back, you should have that buffer.
Yeah, you
Like you
should
said,
just
go
be
Vegas. I mean, Vegas. Like
yeah,
you mentioned
yeah.
Vegas.
don't overdo it. And it's really hard. I was just in I just took a webinar series on the business of writing to learn more, because it's marketing and publicity are always changing. And so you can
Yeah.
never, I mean, I've worked in marketing, and a lot of the things that I know used to work don't really work anymore. So you have to like, reinvent the wheel all the time with yourself, even. The learning curve never ends. Um, and one of the questions I had was, okay, we're using this example of a successful writer in their, newsletter doing all these wonderful things. Okay, I have a newsletter, but I don't have that kind of reach yet because I'm not a big famous writer. And they're using examples of people with hundreds of thousands of readers. It's like, well, you're saying that that's going to work for the person that has 500 readers, and so that all kind of goes back to the idea that when you invest money in your own product, you got to make sure that your book or film or poem or whatever it is that you're trying to put out there, you got to make sure that you are realistic about your expectations. I guess that's really what it comes down to. And throwing money at something is not necessarily going to give you, people, for instance, are paying for reviews, they're paying for beta reads, they're paying for blurb writers and stuff. I don't know if that's good. Some things you're just going to have to just push your sleeves up, and do the work. I mean, right now, I'm making book trailers. I have another one coming out on Sunday, and I'm going to make some really short ones in the next week or two in advance of my book launch next month. And I can do that. That's something I can do. And if I could recommend to anybody, if you're going to take on some of these things yourself, do the things that you enjoy doing and that you feel semi confident doing, and try not to, you don't have to do all the things. Nobody can. And book publishers have whole marketing and publicity teams. We are just a team of one. So you just got to do the best with what tools and resources you have, and ask for help too, wherever you can, for free, from your friends, from your family, from your writing peers and organizations where they can help promote things for you for cheap or hardly anything at all. Yeah, just, I think managing your expectations though about what you're going to get for your dollar, that's a big deal. And I think there are lots of writers who are putting out a lot of money into publicity, and then they're not seeing the payout, and then they're getting discouraged. But it might have been that it was just not the right place. And so some of it is, I think it's going to be a crapshoot for a lot of us, just trying to figure out where to find our people, and rein them in and have them buy our books. I think it also counts that if you have more than one book, that helps a lot. And so part of it is just doing the writing and producing as many products as you can, so that you have this body of work that people can see. It's not just one thing here or there, but a whole universe of titles that people can encounter. And I think people are more likely to, buy things when they see that there's more than one thing out there. So
Yeah, but then there are a couple other questions I have, because you're saying write more things. But what if your first one bombed and then you write
yeah,
another one, and then how,
you just got to
you
keep
know,
writing them. I
okay.
think that happens a lot for a lot of people. And I was just talking to a mentor of mine today, and he was saying, "Oh yeah, I had some, not great ones. I had to push myself earlier. I self-published a couple things early on. Um, you know what? Bombing is great in a way because you learn things. So, a learning experience is what you get when you don't get what you want, right? So even if you do bomb, at least you come out of that richer for the experience. I am actually going to self-publish a novelette this fall. I've never done self-publishing before, so I'm going to be doing that, and we're going to find out whether it does well or not. It's probably not going to do great because it's not really an easy to market, easy to shelf title. It's kind of a contemporary dark fairy tale that is written in a very, experimental way. So I'm just going to experiment with it, knowing that it's probably, even in the commercial world, not going to do well anyway, because I want to see the process of learning. I want to learn how to do the self-publishing from the inside out. I've worked in publishing, and I understand, how to design a book cover, and how to design an interior, and how to work with editors. And those are all things that are familiar to me. So I think I have more of an advantage than some people. But at the end of the day, it changes all the time. I mean, just dealing with Kindle and Amazon, that in itself is a whole new thing for me. So choosing ebooks over print on demand, all of these things. So I'm gonna try that and figure it out. But yeah, if it bombs, it bombs. But you learn something. Um, I would say I'm kind of the person that says expect the worst and hope for the best and just go and just do it anyway. Don't be afraid. Again, don't spend too much money on it if you can't afford it. It's not worth it. But
So in your case,
yeah,
what are you going to do? Because you're going to spend, you have to spend money on
yeah,
self-publishing.
I will. I have found someone who can do fairly inexpensive production round for me. I can give him. I mean, I'm always already going into it with a little bit of an advantage because I know how to put together specs for the book cover and for the interior. So he can just put it together for me and produce it for me. And I've already had an editor look at, actually two editors look at this manuscript that I'm going to be publishing. So it's going to be not that much out of pocket for me. I'll probably make it back, probably not much more than that, but it doesn't matter because for me, it doesn't matter. Of course, for some other people, that's crazy. But yeah, he's pretty fast and turnaround, so I'm probably going to be reaching out to him in August with a manuscript, and hopefully we'll have something by October. Um,
And why
yeah,
do a
and
book?
I'll
But
go
why should
ahead.
people bother to self-publish a book when they can just have a website?
Because that's a great question. And I think this appeals to the poet and the short story writer in me. And that's because I want to be able to have the words that I've written that have already been in another magazine here or a website there, all encased in one spot. So for me, this novelette, it is kind of a personal project. So it's going to be nice to put it between a cover and be able to carry it with me and share it out to other people. um, and there is a message in it. There is a social commentary, if you will, that's part of it, and it's true to my vision as a writer. So I want it to be out in the world. So really, it is about having a physical or even a individual Kindle or ebook, I guess, because it could be other um, uh, iteration of that book, so that someone else can read it. I just want it to be out in front of people. And you
But
can
what
do a website, but people don't really, I don't think they read long form. That's pretty long form. It's like 12,000 words or something. So it's probably too long to read online. And I think it just deserves its own little package.
but what about because I was talking to somebody. The reason why I'm asking this is because somebody was
Yeah.
asking me this today, giving me asking advice because I have been a publisher. So I went through this
Yeah.
several years ago. So, but I said that sometimes what you can do is you can do a website with shorter things and then you can have a download option. So it can be everything wrapped up. So they just have to download a
Hmm.
PDF and they can read it on their phone or something. What do you think about that?
And people
Instead of,
could.
instead of going through the publishing, instead of going through the
Yeah.
publishing.
Because I've worked in publishing and I like having books, and
Okay.
whether they're in a ebook reader or in hand. I don't really like to read online myself,
Mhm.
so part of it is just that it's not something I would ever choose to do. So I think I'm just choosing the pathway that I would like to encounter the book, and actually want to make the book. I mean, it's a contemporary dark fairy tale, so I think there's going to be illustrations, there's going to be art. So I think that's going to look better in a package as opposed to just a download. I've also just found that, I don't know, it's not as satisfying a read to just upload a PDF. And when I upload PDFs, free PDFs that people give away for whatever, I almost never read them.
And then also you mentioned your vision as a writer. What is your vision as a writer?
Well, I have some things to say, and they're social commentary things. A lot of it I can't not do. It shows up everywhere I go, and it has to do with being a Gen X woman raised, coming of age in at the tail end of the 1970s, which is a period of disruption and politics, and being a witness to all of that, and especially through the lens of being a female, being a woman, women's rights, women's lib, ERA, all of that stuff. As a matter of fact, my novelette really addresses that because I have a big, not fascination, but respect for Billie Jean King, because she taught me as a young girl that, yeah, you can do this. Because I was not raised in a household where being a girl was something you should be, you know, proud of. I mean, I was raised to be small and quiet and out of the way and less important. Okay.
Mhm.
So a lot of my writing is me saying no. Because even as a child, and I was quite introverted and shy and, kind of goth and all of that, I knew that was wrong. It's like, no, my personhood is better than that. And I just knew from even a young age that no, that's wrong. So I didn't think my whole life I'm going to be this feminist writer, but it just shows up in my writing because it's part of me alchemizing all the things that have happened to me and putting it into literary packaging, basically, storytelling and whatnot, poets or poetry, that kind of thing. So that's part of it. But I also have big concerns about the environment and big concerns about climate change, and social justice in general for people who are marginalized. These are all things that I've always cared about. I remember being in fifth grade or sixth grade, and I lived in Littleton, Colorado, and we had this play or musical that we did, and it was to the song Free to Be You and Me. And that just like resonated with me so much. And this is in 1976, right?
Marlo
Um,
Thomas.
yes, Free to Be You and Me. Yes, Marlo Thomas. And the other thing that I recall is seeing the movie, the animation, The Lorax, and how that has been a huge influence about the way I look at what we're doing to our planet. So those are things that kind of come up there. Those are topics that are in my novels and my short stories, even if I might be writing a fantasy story. I mean, I have a fantasy story in my collection, and it's really not, it's about the removal of Saddam Hussein, but it's set in a completely different universe. But it opens with the image of the people pulling down that statue of Saddam Hussein, if you can remember. It's called April 6th. It happened in April 6th, 2003. Um, anyway, so those kind of political things kind of show up in my writing, whether I do or not. I am a journalist by trade, and I grew up reading newspapers. I was always like amazing my teachers when we would do current events, like in second or third grade, even, and they'd say, did anybody know this in history class or whatever class that would be? And I would always know the answer, like, Zimbabwe used to be Rhodesia or whatever it was. And they would just be astounded. I'm like, no, I read the paper every day. That doesn't happen anymore. And that just really makes me sad. As a matter of fact, I was at an IHOP recently, and locally there was a big power outage, and there was all these people like in this IHOP, and I was kind of biding my time between appointments, and there was this older couple, and they were sitting there reading their newspapers, and I was like, oh yeah, I love that. That's just so nostalgic for me. And they're like, yeah, that's because we're old.
Hmm. Well, also, I mean, newspapers, I mean, you remember this, when you held a newspaper, you got ink on your
Oh,
hands. And then
yes, you
also some
did.
people were hoarders and they'd have stacks of newspapers.
Yes.
And
I still
phones
kind of
are,
do. Yeah.
but phones
Yeah.
are clean, quote unquote, and they're
No, they're
easily.
gross, actually.
Right.
They are so gross. But no, I mean, newspapers, there's something so satisfying though about going and snapping it open, and it has that perfect crease, and you hear that snap, and then you can go. And I just, every Sunday morning was just in my house, it was poring over these newspapers, having my parents smoked, and drank lots of burnt coffee. So that smell kind of blends with bacon and pancakes and syrup and newsprint. It's all just like comes together, and it's like such a solid, smell memory for me. But I still love it. And I remember another time when I was at a local bookstore with my two young girls. They were little at the time, and it was a cool bakery coffee house, but then they had all these little random books and games and stuff. And we would go there like on snow days. We could walk there from where we lived, and there was all these older gentlemen. I mean, they seemed out of place. They should be really in like a bagel shop in New York City, right? Because they were just like old and kind of gnarly and grumpy, and they'd all sit there with their newspapers and read. And I would just be like, oh, I want to go and just hang out with those guys.
Yeah. So,
So
yeah, but I
those were
think
the
that's why
days.
some people have nostalgia for radio and so forth because they have the memories of listening in the car with their parents or grandparents.
I do have that. We did a lot of road trips as a kid when I was a kid. or we moved a lot because it was not a very stable household that I was raised in. So we were constantly moving with a U-Haul across the country. And yeah, I have those memories. And a lot of my favorite music is really that old school, old timey music that was the only thing you could hear
Yeah.
crossing the Badlands or whatever.
Yeah.
And I kind of like, I listen to podcasts and they're trying to sell you to subscribe so that you can cut out the commercials. And I'm like, I kind of like radio commercials. So
Yeah, there's a nostalgic, yeah. I was gonna say,
seriously.
earlier you were mentioning that you write in a genre that probably a lot of people are not interested in. So how would you define your audience? And actually, do you always write the same kind of genre?
Oh, that's a good question. So, luckily, there's an umbrella term for it, and it's speculative.
Mhm.
Speculative could be a lot of things, and it could be science fiction, which is like its whole own umbrella, right? Fantasy, magical realism is a little bit kind of adjacent. Some things are a little surreal. I take on things that are experimental. I wrote like a reverse chronology story that's in my collection, in which the very first scene is actually the last scene in the book, and you go all the way to the first scene. It was inspired by an episode of Seinfeld, actually, the one where they go to India. That's on the reverse chronology story. Um, I write horror. I write dark stuff that doesn't really fit anywhere. It might be kind of weird. It might fit into the quote unquote new weird genre, which falls under speculative. I write things that are dark, and I write things that are, I mean, the word speculative to me says it all. It says what if. And so I have a post-apocalypse stories, and I have stories about weird things that happen in nature that actually make sense once you get into the world and understand how nature actually has a voice in that story. It's actually its own character. And so it's kind of weird because it's not firm genre. It's not like, okay, this is going to have spaceships and it's going to be, or technology and robots and things like that. It's not really like that. It's not really high fantasy with princes and, swordsmen and dragons. I don't write that kind of stuff either. When I write horror, I don't usually write slasher, although I did recently for the podcast that I work on, because we assign each other, work. And so I had to do a slasher, but I generally write more psychological horror or things that have more of a like an undertone of something else that's anxiety and dark and
Hmm.
fearful and that kind of thing. Um, so I don't really write clean work that fits into a genre, and I actually don't. I like those liminal spaces. I don't really want to write because I don't like to read that either. I mean, I like things that are really offbeat, things that experiment, things that try out new ideas that maybe some people don't like at all. Like I just finished reading I took a class from Richard Thomas, who's right there in Chicago, and it's called Contemporary Dark Fiction. And we had to read Perdido Street Station, which I had attempted a long time ago. It's a huge book, it's like 800 pages. And I was like, oh my God, I have to read this book for a class. And so I have to keep up, and I'm a slow reader. So, but I loved it. I loved it because it had all of these things in it. It had so many things. It was like the future and the past and steampunk, but it was also, AI, and it was just so many things. And it was neo noir. It had, so many things. I love that. I love things that are really hard to categorize. I like that in the kinds of art that I consume, as well as the kinds of art that I create myself. So,
Well,
I mean, I'm just really making stuff for myself and figuring I'm not the only weirdo out there.
yeah, so how many, when you say weirdo, is that how many much of your audience do you have? How much audience of the world do you have?
Well, I mean, there's actually a pretty large group of people who really appreciate things like magical realism or the new weird or speculative fiction. It's actually a pretty big audience. I think people who lean into that are people who really don't want to read realism. They really want, you know, I would say speculative fiction is not necessarily escapism either, because I think like Margaret Atwood is a perfect example of someone who I think of as speculative, or Ursula K. Le Guin, or even Ray Bradbury. And these are people who kind of write around the edges of genre and maybe sometimes write inside genre and maybe sometimes not at all. But I think they're just writing from that wellspring within them of how they see the world and how they're processing it. So I don't know. I just write it. It just comes out of me. There are times I sit down and write, and then I read that whatever I wrote, 6 months later, I don't even remember writing it. So
Well, you said you've always been interested in writing, and so have you always been into that dark stuff?
yeah, oh yeah. I mean, I was reading, mysteries and dark stuff, and of course, being Gen X, we could write all the or read all the inappropriate stuff when we were kids because nobody cared. So I was reading, really dark stuff, and some of it was realism. I mean, some of it was like Go Ask Alice, which is dark, and somebody who was 11 years old probably shouldn't read that, but I read it. I was reading early. I was reading, Lord of the Rings, which is kind of some elements of it are dark, but that I was reading that at 9 or 10. Let's see. Yeah, and I've always loved mysteries and the gothic. I love ghosts and paranormal and supernatural things. I remember this is so funny and weird. We had to do a book report in sixth grade, and it was a book report in which you had to present it, and you had to like do a task that was outlined in the book. So you had to actually perform this task that from this book as a way to show that you read the book and whatever. And so I found this book, and it was a children's book in a library right there in school, but it was how to do an exorcism. And so, they had the salt, you had to like put the salt to do the pentagram and everything. And I just was like, well, that's interesting. And so I did that. And so that was my report. And my teacher, that was one of the first times I felt like, oh, this is going to be okay. His name was Mr. Logan, and he watched me, and I'm like, here, we're going to do this. And you have to say these spells and all, whatever it is it was. And he had the smile on his face, like, like, just go there. And so, I mean, good teachers, they're everything. And the ones that have encouraged me, I, have so much gratitude to them because I needed that validation, to because I'm doing these weird different things. But I was always fascinated in like I don't know, natural disasters as a kid. I would read all the books on tornadoes and just
Well,
weird encounters and yeah.
well, when you say that you're creative and you've been into all this, and it sounds like you weren't setting out to be mainstream, quote unquote. How do
No.
you encourage people who feel horrible about not being in the mainstream? Like they know they're different. I'm talking about creative people. They know they're
Oh,
different and they don't have a typical
yeah.
view, but they don't find those supportive people.
Oh, find them. They're out there. I mean, just kind of find them. I belong to the Horror Writers Association. I have belonged to there was a speculative fiction organization I belonged to in the past. I do have a couple critique groups that are nothing but writers who do speculative writing. And thank goodness. I mean, because the nice thing about when you do find your people is that there are whole conversations you don't have to have. You don't have to justify your choices. We all know why we're there, and it's all personal and it's all wrapped up in that what if question, right? But you just have to find them. I was in several writing groups for a long time, and then I kind of burn out on them. I just didn't feel like I was getting what I needed out of them. And so I kind of went it alone. That's not good either. It's really hard. You need feedback. So during the pandemic, I joined another one, and it's just been amazing. It was just the right people at the right time, and being accountable to them is all the things. I mean, now I want to write because I want to write for them. So they end up being kind of my audience too. Um, but yeah, if you're gonna write weird stuff, just own it. Just lean into it. Just be the weirdo. Being weird is the new black these days anyway. So you
Yeah, but
may as well.
you're in on the West Coast, so maybe
Yeah.
is it more acceptable out there to be weird,
Oh
quote unquote?
yeah. Yeah, I think it probably is. And that's a really good point. I just had a conversation with a friend of mine who had lived in North Carolina for quite a while, and it's a very different climate. Yeah,
Because there seems
different
like everybody
climate
from Illinois is moving there, it seems.
to North Carolina.
Oh yeah.
Oh
I just talked
wow,
to somebody the
really?
other day, literally 2 days ago, and this guy said he wants to move there. Yeah.
Wow.
It's
Well, I don't
popular.
know
More a
anything
lot of
about
people are
it.
moving there. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. But even my friend who had just left there and was like, "Oh, it was not great," because he's a gay man and does drag and does some other things. And it was like you find your pockets though. He's always been able to find those people. So just find them. They're out there somewhere. And I have to tell you the story that I hope that he doesn't mind that I share this, but I was really
Okay,
proud
well,
of him
hopefully he doesn't
because
mind because this is going to be on the internet. So,
it is, but it's fine. I won't name him. It doesn't matter. It's fine. He basically said that he was, in this working environment, and there's some younger people in there who were just amazed because he had worked his way rapidly up the chain of command in this business. And the younger people were like, wow. They were just amazed to see a man from the queer community running a business. And they were so excited. And like someone who looks like me can do that and be in charge. And I was like so excited for him. And you could see in his face, he was just like, that's why you do what you do, and you own it. You do it so that you can inspire someone else who needs to do that, and wants to, but feels alone or feels like they're outside. Sometimes it's better to be outside. I mean, being inside
why is it?
anymore these days, I think it's better to be outside because maybe you can always be a little bit more honest and fearless about what you're doing and just stop caring so much about what other people think. I think we're in this weird place in our culture where everyone is so worried about, you know, and it's because, we've got TikTok and we've got reality TV and all these things where the voyeurism is like at an all-time high and everyone's being studied for every, and if you make one little mistake, it's all over the internet and so forth. Everyone's just under the spotlight. Um, I think that people are afraid then to venture out from what they think of as acceptable because they might be, I don't know, canceled, I guess. And in some cases that's probably a good thing because
Or just
being
scrutinized. If they're not
or
canceled,
scrutinized,
scrutinized.
yeah,
Yeah.
or scrutinized, and then they have to be able to stand up for that. And I mean, if you're just truly being yourself, then just do it. And I don't know, for me it's easy, but I think that this is a reason why a lot of people don't push themselves a little bit further when they're creating, whether it's writing or art or whatever it is they do, because they're afraid of that scrutiny and afraid that, even though they fully believe in what they're doing, they just don't want the exhaustion of having to, like, justify. And we should not have to justify being creative people and having our own unique visions. But we are in the kind of culture right now where if you don't fit in somewhere, but I think that if there was more of us going out there and saying, well, I'm going to do my own thing and screw the rest of the world. I mean, we just need to tip that balance, or create a balance so that people don't feel like they're pressured to self censor or self remove or self, edit to make
But
everybody else happy.
yeah, but I think that some people have they feel sort of odd being creative because they see the really successful creative people, but they're not there, so they feel bad and they think, well, maybe there's something wrong with what I'm doing. Or maybe I can only make money,
Uh,
which goes to the earlier question, the earlier
yeah.
discussion.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
tough thing because the what we see out in the world is all packaged for us, and we have to remember that there are tons and tons and tons of really valid, creative, amazing creative creators, whether they're writers or they're musicians or whatever, um, may never make that big spotlight, never become rich or famous, but they still do really amazing work that changes our lives. I think that, I love the fact that I can go into like Spotify or, one of those, and listen to music. I didn't even know, for instance, what shoegaze was until this year. And now I'm listening to this and I'm like, oh, this is nice. And it's not on the radio,
Shoegaze
but
is actually shoegaze style. I started my podcast in 2009, and Panda Riot is shoegaze from years ago. That's what I
yeah,
use in my podcast, but I didn't know what it was called. I just liked it. I just want
yeah,
to give them
right.
a shout out.
Yeah, so there's that. And then, if you're reading literary magazines or whatever, or just websites that are just poetry or whatever it is, you're going to find these obscure things that totally resonate. And so, do you know, to me, that's permission to just keep doing that because obviously someone else is doing it and it moved you. So, I mean, that's kind of why I create. I want to move people. I want them to think. I want them to maybe feel heard or represented in some way. I do write a little bit about having multiple sclerosis and, some neurodivergent things. And I do that because speaking that out aloud helps make it easier for others to see that it's fine. It's fine. We all are very unique and different. And um, I just, I feel like I've heard enough people say you inspire me that I'm like, okay, I'm just going to keep
Wow.
doing this, you know? Why
That's so
not? Because
encouraging.
I mean, I want to be encouraging. I do think there are lots of people who are trying to write who probably don't have it, but that's true in every kind of profession, really. So, um, people have to learn what they can and can't do, or what they're capable of, what their limits are. We all have limits, whether we think, there's this like weird American mindset that the sky's the limit. No, there are limits. There are bigger limits than you think. Just because you dream it doesn't always mean you can do it, or you can do it, but it's going to really be freaking hard.
Well, why you said earlier that it was easy for you to be not in the mainstream, or to be different, or to be an outsider, however you want to label it. Why has it been easy for you?
Well, it wasn't easy initially because I was, as a kid, it was not easy at all because I was always kind of the weird kid out. And um, I could put on the mask and be friendly enough and do the right things in a classroom environment or maybe on the playground just for, survival. Be friendly enough. I have a big smile. You can kind of hide a whole bunch of sins just by, putting on this friendly mask, which I've learned to do. But I still have all the dark stuff brewing in the back of my head. So I think it was easier for me. I think when after I had kids, I think, and I decided I'm not going to wait until I'm old to start writing. I'm going to just start writing now, and I'm going to raise my kids. And um, I think it became easier for me because we are now in the space where we can raise children to really. We have more tools in place than we ever had before, or systems in place, maybe to allow people to be themselves. And so, we're talking about if you're gay or if you are a person of color or something. I think that they're not that we have lots of work to do, but I think that parents have more tools for broadening the universe for their children and raising the ceiling of their lives so that they can see that the world is more than just this little thing, but it's actually big and diverse. And so that was really a big goal of mine as a parent, was to raise my children to have see the world from a much bigger view than the sheltered view. And sometimes, it meant, having hard conversations. But I think by doing that, I've also felt the pressure to live by example, teach by example, by living my values. And that's something I've always felt is like live your values. And if you're going to be weird and lean into it, don't just tell people to do it, go and do it. And that at the end of the day, if you want to inspire people, you have to be doing the things that you're, proffering. You're telling people to do this. And I also used to be a coach, and so a writing coach, creativity coach, and I think it's really wrong to say I'm a coach, but then not live by your own systems and your own advice. So parenting was like that for me. It was like, okay, I want to show my kids that they can be the person they need to be, and that I'm not going to force them into, pigeonholes and stuff, and then they can try and experiment and it's safe. And so by being a parent, I think I gave myself permission to then just own it. It's actually so much easier to lean into your own weirdness once you get past the whole feeling judged by other people. Then you're
Hmm.
like, oh, I don't care about those people. They really don't matter.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
other people, they come forward and they're great. So
But how do you define weird? Because we keep using this expression. That's why keep
yeah,
saying
I
quote
know.
unquote.
Quote unquote. Well, weird meaning for me, I think weird, I think it's going to depend on who the person is that's using it, but being irreverent, not being traditional about things, rethinking approaches to things that are not conventional, thinking outside of the box, really, and then always questioning why do it this way? Why can't we do it another way? Why don't we try it these three different ways and see which works out best? And so it's kind of a mindset, really. um I don't wear my weirdness maybe so much. I have some tattoos and some earrings and stuff, but
But
that's
sometimes
not
it's not
really,
a physical thing.
it's not a
It's not a
physical thing
physical,
at all.
it's within.
It's totally within. It's just like going out and just, choosing your vibe and owning it. And um not really, and just really letting go of judgment from other people. And it's really hard in a culture that is like, you must fit these lanes, stick, find a lane and stick to it. And I'm like, not necessarily. You can find another lane, because I think human beings are always growing and changing. And if we're always stuck in the same lane, how are we going to do that?
And our
Yeah.
culture is one of
So
the most free cultures on the planet.
yeah, right. We are, but I think sometimes we're not. I feel like that's really changed with the rise of certain other kinds of social institutions, and religion is really kind of having a shaping force in different ways. That's kind of political now. That, I mean, it always has been, but really bald-faced in a way now. So maybe weird is just saying no to these things that would try to take away our power to be individuals.
So is that your vision also is the thriving individual?
Kind of, but I think that we should function as individuals for sure. But I think we should do it. Well, I don't want to use the word should, because it depends. But for me, okay, I want to function in my individual little one person way, in a way that could actually help a community. So I think there's a community aspect to it that's really important, that we need to think about the things that we do with our time as parents, as creative people, as human beings, as workers, as siblings, whatever roles we have. The things we do in those individual roles do have repercussions. And so if you can always try to keep in your head, do the thing because it makes the world a better place, then that's a leg up on what other people are doing. A lot of people are really just living, they're just like zombies or robots or drones. They're not really doing the things they want to do, because they feel like they have to be doing these other things just to pay the bills. And then at the end of the day, they don't have a sense of identity at all. And I'm saying, if you have a sense of identity, don't just be so narcissistic that you only do it to better yourself, but find a way to make it bigger than you. And then that just brings so much meaning into your life and into the work that you do and put out into the world.
Well, and we only have a few minutes left because I know you have something else because your calendar is tight. I mean,
Oh
we
my
could I could
God.
talk to you for like hours. I mean,
Let's
seriously. I
talk
mean, the
again another
longest,
time.
yeah, the longest interview I've done is 3 hours. So,
Oh
but
boy.
usually it's at least, yeah. But well, I'd like to ask you, a quick question before you go. How did you have the energy to have kids and do all this stuff? Because if I had kids, I don't think I'd be even able to work.
Well,
It just seems
it's
like it's
funny.
very hard.
It's a lot. It's a lot. I there's a lot of compromises, let's put it that way. I waited, 8 years before I had kids. So I had 8 years of grown up living and doing all that stuff before I we had children. And um part of that was just so that I could get some experience for me. I knew I was going to be the one that was raising the kids, but I actually really thought of raising children not as just this task, but like a huge responsibility. You're trying to bring two functional people into the world. So I took it really seriously, but I wasn't like the hovering mom. I was more of like the throw the puzzle that's unfinished in front of them and make them do it, and always like that. But I guess not holding yourself to a level of perfectionism is really important. That there's always going to be a mess, and that's fine, as long as you keep reaching for the things that are important and making time for your family. And setting those are boundaries too. Like today, right now, mommy's working, but in a couple minutes we're going to go and hang out, and it all worked out. A lot of organizing. I think, why did I think I could do that? I didn't, it's kind of like a small business person who starts out. If they knew what they're in for, they probably wouldn't start a business, right? So you kind
Yeah.
of go in with little naivete, and that's fine. I mean, and but for me, parenthood was it was kind of a it was kind of, for me, it was different maybe for me than others, because I wanted to break some cycles in my family. There were some abuse issues, and there's some other things, and I wanted to be very cognizant of that stuff as a parent. So I did take it a lot quite seriously. And so there's always a conflict between creating and, parenting, but I wouldn't change it for anything, because there's so much to learn. And then my kids got to see me being myself. And that was really important, because I didn't have a mother who really was her full self. She wasn't allowed to be her full self. And I didn't want to repeat that with my own. I had two daughters. I did not want to repeat that with them. I wanted them to see me striving. And now they are two people who are striving. And I'm, kind of proud of that. That's like the best thing in the world. So you just, some days everything clicks, and some days it's just a big chaos. And then you just get up the next day and take a deep breath and just keep going, and do the best that you can, and forgive yourself a lot. Forgive yourself for not getting the deadline, or not being able fully present with your kids in this moment, or whatever. To me it's like I would rather be super busy and a little chaotic than bored and not having a purpose.